this is what we're going to be looking at then in today's lesson. We're going to be looking at reference questions. We're going to be looking at some idioms, and we're going to look at some lexical items. Okay, so that's really what we're doing today. And the word lexis as well, don't get confused. All it means is vocabulary. That's really a simpler way of looking at it. But remember, this isn't a vocabulary test. This is a reading test. So you're not tested on vocabulary, whether you know the meaning of words. You're tested on whether you can understand how these words are being used in context. So that's something we're going to look at today as well. And we're going to start off with reference questions. So referencing, these are words which refer to something in the text. Often they refer back, but sometimes they might refer forward, or they might even refer to something outside of the text. With OET, most of the times you're going to have to go backwards. They're going to refer to something that has been previously mentioned. But be careful, they do like to trick you with OET, so you never know. You may have to go forwards. So common reference words, often pronouns, subject pronouns, I, you, he, she, it, we, or they. An example here, he was informed that the surgery would be delayed until next week. And you can see the pronoun here, he. And you think, what is he referring to? It's probably referring to a previous sentence. Maybe it's talking about the patient. And we have these reference words, if you like, so we avoid repetition. And you can see we've probably said the patient's name. Now we moved on to he. As well as subject pronouns, there are also object pronouns such as me, him, her, it, us, them. And here's an example. She informed him the surgery would be delayed until next week. And you can see the object pronoun him. And again, maybe you're talking about the patient, maybe you said the patient's name, and we use these reference words to avoid repetition. So as well as subject and object pronouns, we also have determinants, this and that for singular, these and those we use for plurals. Okay, so here's a quick task for you to do. And like I said, if you have questions, please just put them into the chat. And we're just going to do a quick task then. There's two questions. Can you identify the reference word and what is it referring to? Okay, this won't take you long. It's 30 seconds. You're not even going to need that. Okay, I mean, lots of answers have come in. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay, so that's fine. Just, you can see a lot of you have got it. The reference word is in the second sentence, the word this. What is this referring to? Well, to get the answer, you've got to go back to the previous sentence. We've got an endoscopy. Basically, that's what it means. In fact, you could even take out the word this and you could say an endoscopy is generally a quick procedure. But we have these reference words, so we can avoid repetition, as you can see. And to get the answer to this question here, I had to go back to the previous sentence. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to practice some reference questions. There are 3 questions. The first question, you have a minute. The paragraph is fairly short. The second question, I think you've got 1.5 minutes. And then the third question, you've got 2 minutes. After you've done the 3 questions, we're then going to look at the answers. So remember, these are all reference questions. Most of the time, you will have to go back to find the answer. Okay, so let's go. The topic for this reading, it comes from a reading about ADHD, attention deficit disorder. And this is really important because you need to know the context. It always helps if you know what you're reading about. And it's the same with listening. Context is really important. If you know what you're listening to, it can make a difference. So I always look at the heading at the top of the paper with the reading and with the listening as well to make sure I know what I'm reading or listening about. So this is ADHD. for your question, your answer options, and you've got 1 minute. Let's go on to question number 2. This time the topic is sleep deprivation, which is what you're reading about. Question, answer option. This time you've got 1.5 minutes. Okay, great. And the final question, this time it's about food allergies. Questions, this time you got 2 minutes. Okay, great. Tricky question. See, lots of answers. Okay, let's go back through the 3 questions. the first question that we had was on ADHD, and you can see the reference where they, it comes in the final sentence of the paragraph. Obviously, we're going to have to go back to get the answer anyway. And they is a plural as well, so you can kind of assume it's referring to something which is a plural, not a singular thing. But if we look at the paragraph here, this is the sentence before. And if we go back to the sentence before, the writer talks about studies from the UK and Brazil. And these studies, they found out that with ADHD, there are two different types. There are adult onset ADHD and also childhood ADHD as well. So there are two different types of ADHD. And then this sentence, of course, it's important. They echo earlier research. Well, what is echoing earlier research? When you look at the four answer options, there's really only one word which fits into that sentence. And you can see here in the sentence before, they refer to studies, and that's really what they were talking about. So to get the answer there, you can see what we've had to do is really go back to the sentence before. Okay, great. Lots of right answers. And then let's go on to the next question. This was about sleep deprivation. And you can see the reference word, it. Again, you have to go back to really find the answer. This is what the sentence says. I'll just read the beginning. It says, this is because it degrades the energy molecule ATP. So you've got to find out what degrades the energy molecule ATP. And of course, you've got to go back to the sentence before. The sentence before talks about, again, Van Coorter's research, something about research again. She found evidence that an enforced lack of sleep sends the brain into a catabolic or energy-consuming state. Okay, so that's what a lack of sleep can do, sends the brain into a catabolic or energy-consuming state because it degrades the energy molecule. Again, if you look at the answer options, you can see there's only really one word which will fit here. It's not an enzyme. It's not an enzyme that degrades the energy molecule. There's no reference to an enzyme there, in fact. So you can rule out option A. It's not new evidence that degrades this energy molecule as well. You can rule out B. Now, it did refer to a catabolic state, but that's the state the brain goes into. It doesn't cause this energy molecule to degrade. And so it is, in fact, enforced lack of sleep, as many of you have got. And again, you can see it's there in the text, it's there in the sentence. And great, okay. And actually what we did there, we'll talk about this a bit later. We also eliminated the wrong answers. This is called process of elimination. If ever you're not sure which is the right answer, something you can do to help you is eliminate the wrong answers. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Let's stick with these reference questions. This question was a little bit different because you didn't just have the reference word, you had the reference word with another word. This one said this rule, as you can see here. So you've got to find the rule. What is the rule they're talking about? Again, if you look at the sentence, it says there are so many exceptions to this rule that other forces are clearly at work. Well, there are a lot of exceptions to this rule. And again, you've got to find out what the rule is. It's a reference word, which is this, and that means you're probably going to have to go back to the previous sentence. If I just take out a few words here, this is what the previous sentence talks about. It talks about an ideal recipe for a food allergy is if you're born of allergic parents, and then you have a high exposure to allergenic food stuff. It's basically your parents might be allergic to peanuts, I was trying to say. Your parents would be allergic to peanuts, and then you eat a lot of peanuts. So those two things combined mean you have a high chance of having a peanut allergy. I've got process of elimination again, because if you're not sure, and I think this is quite a tricky question, you can always eliminate the wrong answers. Option A talks about the likelihood of having an inherited allergy. There was nothing about a likelihood there. It didn't talk about diet in option B as well. So you can rule out option B. The degree of contact with allergens needed to trigger a reaction. Nothing about triggers as well. So really, in a way, all that you are left with is option D, which is the correct answer. And you can see the order of events. So firstly, you're born to parents who are allergic to something, and then you consume a lot of this allergic food stuff. These are the two order of events. But again, with these reference words, you can see even when it's with another word, like this rule, it didn't just say this, but the principle, the idea is the same. All you've had to do is to go back to the previous sentence, or you may have to go back further, in fact, but that's what you're doing. You're going back to find out what this word or words refer to. So that's the general idea with referencing and reference questions. And like I said, just be aware sometimes with OET, they do like to trick you, and reference words can also refer to something forward in the text as well. So it's just something to be aware of. Okay, so guys, brilliant. We've looked at referencing. We're going to look at some idioms as well, because occasionally I've seen idioms as well in Reading Part C. What is an idiom? Well, an idiom is a phrase, or it could be an expression we don't mean literally. In other words, we don't actually mean what we say. For example, it's raining cats and dogs. Now, I don't literally mean that it's raining cats and dogs, that cats and dogs are falling out of the sky. I don't mean that at all. All I mean is it's raining heavily. So that's really what an idiom is. It's something, it's like we say a metaphor. We don't mean it literally, we mean it metaphorically. And there are lots and lots of idioms in English, and it's useful to build up a bank of idioms, not just for reading, but also for listening as well. Here are some common idioms. We're just going to do a quick task with idioms, and then we'll do one question around idioms. A far cry from. So nothing to do with crying, and a far cry from, it kind of means you're a long way from something, but it doesn't mean distance. It's not talking about a mile or a kilometer away from something. We'll have a look in a moment at more context, and we'll have a look at these idioms. Another one, the jury is out. So in a court of law, you have a jury. These are, in the UK, these are 12 people who listen very carefully to a court case, and then they decide if someone is innocent or not guilty. The jury is out is when they're still thinking. So this is another idiom because it's nothing to do with juries and court cases. To raise the bar, nothing to do with a bar. The bottom line, nothing to do with a line. And something which brings home to me as well. Something which brings something home to you is often, it's almost, it's nothing to do with a home. It's really when you realize something. So we'll talk a little bit about about these idioms in a moment. What we're going to do is we'll do a quick task. You can see there are 5 idioms. There are 5 questions. What you need to do is put the idioms into the questions. You've got 2 minutes, guys. Okay, that's really good. It's fantastic. Lots of answers coming in. Okay, great. So let's have a look at this, and we'll talk a little bit more about these idioms. Number one was the bottom line. Medication is important for treating cardiac complications, but the bottom line is that lifestyle is more important. This is really what it's saying in this sentence. So the bottom line is kind of like a way of saying that this is the most important thing. There are all these things, but the most important thing is this. And you can see in this sentence, the writer is really trying to emphasize how important lifestyle is for your heart. So that's an interesting idiom. We had the bottom line. With number two, standards in healthcare. We were talking about standards, and often we use this idiom to raise the bar. So, and what we're talking about is raising standards. It's a strange way of actually talking about raising standards, but that's often what we say. You could use it in many different contexts. In this sentence, we're talking about standards in health. So raising the bar, we're going to raise the standards. Number three, the benefits and drawbacks of this medication may not be known. So we're not sure about something, the jury is out. So it means something is not decided yet. Something is still undecided. Okay, great. The number four, procedures and practices. Something 100 years ago. So they're very different now. Health practices, health procedures, compared to what they were 100 years ago, they're very different. A long way from, in fact, so we could say a far cry from. So yeah, that's an interesting idiom. Just means it's a long, long way from what it used to be. And so finally, we know the last one here brings home to me. It makes you realize something. In this sentence, the writer says that seeing how the patients have benefited from the therapy, it really made the writer understand how important cardiac rehabilitation was. So to bring home to you, it makes you understand something, makes you realize something. Okay, so some interesting idioms there. And as you prepare for your OET exam, it really is worth learning as much language as possible, including idioms as well, because they do also use these in Part C of the listening subtest as well. So let's do a question. Let's do a little bit of practice. We're just going to do one question with an idiom, and then we'll discuss afterwards. The topic, because of the context, is always important. So this time you're reading about migraines. The heading, migraine more than just a headache. Okay, there's your question. You can see your idiom in there, answer options. And guys, you've got 2 minutes. Okay, great. Okay, brilliant. So let's just have a look at this question here. Now, if you know this idiom, it is an advantage. If you know the lexical items, the vocabulary words that are in the questions, it is an advantage. And again, it's why it's so important to build up your vocabulary as you prepare for this exam. So we'll talk a little bit about this idiom afterwards, because even if you don't know what the idiom is, you can, of course, still get the answer. And like I said, you're not being tested on the meaning of the idiom, you're being tested on how it's being used. So we'll talk about this idiom in a little bit. This is all it says, but there is a silver lining. Doesn't really tell us a great deal. You might have to go back and forwards. We're not sure, but it's always a good idea to read the whole paragraph anyway. Sometimes students say to me, do I need to read the whole paragraph? Can I just go here halfway through, or can I just look at these sentences? It is possible to do that, but I wouldn't really recommend it. I know you're under time pressure, but it's always good to get the context. If you can get the context of a paragraph, if you can really understand what a paragraph is saying and what the writer is trying to tell you, it really makes a difference. So I would say just read the whole paragraph anyway. And let's have a quick look at this paragraph. Sorry, it starts off by talking about research. Remember the context, remember we're talking about migraines. And it's saying here, this research is worrying, suggests it's time for doctors to treat the condition more aggressively. And it talks about finding out triggers so we can stop attacks, these migraine attacks from happening. As you read this sentence, you might notice here, just going to highlight something. It says, this research is worrying. It's quite a negative thing here. So the writer is saying, I'm quite concerned about the findings of this research. And you want to pick up on little things as well. And you can see, but there's a silver lining. So these words like but or however, in contrast, they're telling you that an opposite is coming. So but is a contrast word, just like however, and it's telling you now we've got something coming, we've got an opposite thing coming. So we've got something worrying, but now we're going to have something which isn't worrying. We're going to have a good thing. You can read on, and I'm sure you read it, talked about Alzheimer's and the difference with migraines and Alzheimer's. And just at the bottom, if I highlight this sentence, it says treatments used to be all about reducing the immediate pain, but now it seems they might be able to achieve a great deal more. So basically, it sounds very positive, what they found with treatments. Looking at the answer options then, again, if you're not sure, you can use process of elimination. The actual answer is B, a more positive aspect of the research. But like I said, if you're not sure, you can always eliminate the other answers. And like I said, if you know the meaning, the actual full idiom is every cloud has a silver lining, which means in every bad situation, you can always find something positive. You may have a difficult situation, but there's always something good to come out of it. That's kind of what it means. So if you knew the meaning of that idiom in the first place, it is an advantage. But don't panic, because if you don't know, remember, you've just got to work things out from context. Okay, and in fact, even if you do know, you've still got to look at the context as well. Okay, so let's move on, guys. We've looked at referencing, we've just looked at some idioms, we're going to look at some lexical items, and all that means are words and phrases as well. So sometimes in reading Part C, you're just given a single word. Here's a question. When the writer uses the word cost, she is referring to, okay, so the word cost, it's like a reference word here, in fact, because it's referring to something. Could be something already mentioned or something you might have to go forward in the text. We're not sure, but we're going to read the whole text anyway. But really importantly, they're not asking you, what is the definition of cost? What does cost mean? We all know the meaning of cost. the amount of money needed to buy, make, or do something. It could be a verb, such as the book costs £20. It could be a noun. The cost of the book is £20. Okay, and also we can use the word cost in many different ways. So you can use it almost like a verb phrase. You can cut the costs, cover the costs, you can count the costs. Or sometimes we can use it as an adjective as well. Something could be cost effective. It could cost the earth, meaning it's really expensive. Or we've got an idiom here, cost an arm and a leg, meaning it's really expensive. And there are just other phrases, no extra cost at any cost, or something could cost a pretty penny. So we can use this word cost in many different ways. If you know the meaning of cost, yeah, it's an advantage. But if you don't, it's fine, because you've still got to look at the context. So here are the answer options. And you can see none of these are definitions of the word cost. So we need to work out how the word cost is being used in context. We need to understand the paragraph. We need to understand the context. To understand the context, yeah, we got to read the whole paragraph, and that's what we're going to do. This is the paragraph, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take away the answer options, just get rid of all of this, because we're really going to try to understand the paragraph. So you're going to read the paragraph for a minute. After 1 minute, the answer options will appear. And this is so we can really understand the context. What you're reading about is the prenatal origins of heart disease. Okay, let's give it a go, guys. The clock is ticking. You've got a minute to read, and then after a minute, you're going to see the answer options. Okay, you've got the answer options here. Okay, great. Okay, brilliant. Thanks for putting your answers in to the chat. And let's just have a look at this paragraph then. And again, just trying to understand the context of this paragraph. It starts off talking about pregnancies in the womb, which are complicated. If conditions are suboptimal, so if conditions aren't perfect, you have complications in the womb. And these leads to things like preeclampsia and other kind of conditions, if you like, which it says here enforce physiological adaptations in the unborn child and placenta. So the fetus, if you like, is slightly deformed, or it changes if conditions aren't perfect. All it's really saying, and it's saying these changes, they're necessary so you can still give birth, but they come at a cost. And you can see the meaning of cost here is quite a negative thing. So we need to work out, what is this cost? The next sentence is really important because they're going to tell us what the cost is. Well, you can still give birth, but the trade-off is reduced growth. And that in turn affects the key organs, heart, circulation. And remember the context, guys, you're talking about prenatal origins of heart disease. And it's an interesting idea that, when you're a fetus, the conditions in the womb affect your chances of getting heart disease, later on in your life when you're 30, 40, 50 years old. And this is an example here. If conditions aren't perfect, it could affect your organs. But basically, it leads to reduced growth. So that was really what the word cost was referring to. And again, if you're not sure, you can use process of elimination. You can eliminate the wrong answers. Okay, so idioms, build up your language, get as much idioms, learn as many idioms as you can. Also here, we've got another word here, effort substitutions. We've got a phrase this time. What is meant by the phrase effort substitution? Well, you probably know the meaning of effort, to try really hard. And you probably know the meaning of substitution, meaning to replace something. But together, these words don't really make any sense. This isn't a normal phrase. So the only way we can get the answer is, of course, by looking at the context. And we can get the context by reading the whole paragraph, which is what we're going to have to do to get the answer. So this is the context. We're going to do this question. It talks about patient safety, highlighting a collaborative initiative to improve patient safety. So it sounds complicated, but it's not too complicated. Remember, it's really just about patient safety. You've got a collaborative initiative, so people working together, groups, teams working together on an initiative. And again, if you're not sure what that is, you don't have your dictionary, you're going to have to understand what these words are in their context very quickly. And you might think initiative, it comes from the word initial, something which is starting. So kind of what it means here, it's a new idea about patient safety where we've got different teams or groups working together. That's the context. It's really worth understanding that because it can help you. So here is the paragraph. I've taken out the answer options. They will appear after 1 minute. Okay. Great, let's look at this again. What we're going to do, we're just going to go through the paragraph. And remember, we were talking about patient safety. Well, the writer here uses Professor Dixon Woods of the University of Cambridge, and she's talking about patient safety, saying it's going to be a challenge. It's not an easy thing to do. You have different policies, you have different approaches, and they haven't really been successful. She talks about financial incentives, trying to motivate companies and staff members financially, but seems like this has little effect. And then you kind of got a quote here. In fact, you have got a quote saying there's a danger that they tend to encourage effort substitution. So she's talking about the financial she's talking about financial incentives. They encourage effort substitution. We still don't know what that means. But then here, in other words, so the writer is now going to explain what effort substitution means. And the writer tells you that people concentrate on areas that are being incentivized, but they neglect other areas. If you're being financially paid to focus on one area of your work, you're going to neglect the other areas. Not because you think necessarily this is more important, it's because you're being financially rewarded to do this. It's really what the writer is trying to say. So again, if you're not sure, what you could use is process of elimination. A lot of you have got the answers, so it's fine. But just going through them one by one, because there was nothing there about monetary resources being diverted unnecessarily. And also about option B, time and energy is wasted on irrelevant matters. It didn't say things were irrelevant. It's just we're being encouraged to focus on something. Maybe it is still relevant. Maybe it's very important. But the writer didn't say it was actually irrelevant. So it wasn't option B. Option D, take on tasks which you're unfamiliar with. Again, it didn't actually say that at all. So really what you're left with is option C, which is the correct answer, and which most of you do indeed have. Okay. So just to recap, guys, we looked at referencing with these lexical questions. It's not, you're not being tested on the definition of words. You're being tested on what these words often refer to or how they're being used in context. Reference words are really common, and they normally go back to something which has already been mentioned in the text, as we saw today. Like I said, just be careful with OET, because you never know. Sometimes you might have to go forward. And when you do go back, you might have to go back 2 sentences or even 3 sentences. So with referencing, generally you do go back to find the answer. You're not tested on definitions, as I was saying. This is really important. It's not a vocabulary test, it's a reading test. You need to know how these words are used in context. Of course, it's an advantage if you know the meaning of these words. In fact, it's a big advantage. And that's why I keep saying, as you prepare for the OET, try to build up your vocabulary. The more language you have, the better it is. And remember, this isn't a medical test. It's not a test of your medical knowledge. It's a test of your language knowledge. So get as much language as you can. And we talked about understanding the context. You can get the answer, from 1 or 2 sentences, but it really helps with almost with every question if you can really understand the context of the paragraph. And that's why we were, trying a different method at the end. We took away the answer options A, B, C, and D, so we could really focus on the paragraph. Because if you can really understand what the writer is saying and what the writer is trying to tell you, that makes a big difference. So remember the context, really get the context, read the whole paragraph. As I said before, just now, build up your vocabulary as well. Okay, and the other thing you need to do with reading Parts B and C is to read extensively, just read lots of things. There's things, the British Medical Journal, there's things on the BBC website. There are different academic journals, newspapers. Just really read as much as you can as you prepare for the OET exam. So I hope that was of some use, guys. If you need further practice with reading, go to our website, wles.net, and have a look at our OET page. There's some self-study packages there. Or if you want to work with a tutor as well, we have other courses, online courses. So wherever you are in the world, you can still work with one of our tutors. And if you're here in London, please do come in to see us. We're based in Ealing. We're in West London. We're running the next face-to-face course. I think it's May the 3rd. Is it around then? So please do come in if you want to sign up. You need to be quick though. And that's it. Just wish you all the best. I'll see you again, probably I think next month. Good luck with your OET, guys. I really do wish you all the best and hope you can get through this exam. And I'll see you again next month. Stay well, take care, and look after yourself.